So today, we need to talk about something that's already costing you money, but you might not even realize it. It's a hidden tax, really. It's called a tariff, and believe me, it's quietly reshaping your finances as we speak. Yeah, you heard that right. There's a new tax that just hit your wallet, and chances are you didn't even notice. But think about it. If you've bought a coffee maker lately, or a new TV, or even just some parts for your car, you've probably already paid it. This isn't some far-off problem, folks. It's happening right now. And the numbers behind this whole shift, they are absolutely staggering. All right, check this out. In 2025, these new tariffs made the average U.S. import tax rate just skyrocket. We're talking a jump from a pretty modest 2.5% all the way up to 16.5%. Now, to put that into perspective for you, this is the single biggest leap in American import taxes since the 1930s, since the Great Depression. I mean, we are literally living through a massive, historically significant economic shift. Okay, and just a quick heads up before we dive deeper, this is all for educational purposes. It is not financial advice. So let's get into this hidden price hike. For most of 2025, a lot of the big companies, they actually ate these new costs themselves. They didn't want to scare you, the customer, away with higher prices. But, well, that buffer, it's starting to disappear. And the real impact is just now starting to bubble up to the surface. So how much are we really talking here? Well, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, these tariffs have already tacked on about half a percentage point to core inflation. Now, I know 0.5% doesn't sound like a ton, but think of it like this. For every $10,000 you spend, that's an extra $50 right out of your pocket. This isn't some abstract economic theory. It's a real cost, and it's already hitting your budget. And what's really important to understand is that experts are warning this is just the beginning. I mean, listen to this. Matthias Cormann, the head of the OECD, said back in December 2025 that companies have basically been running on their old inventory, the stuff they bought before the tariffs hit. But once that's gone, the full effect of these higher costs is going to hit the market. So the key takeaway here, the price hikes we've seen so far, they're just the warm-up act. Okay, so how does this actually work? How does a government policy end up taking money out of your wallet? Well, it all starts with busting a huge, very common myth about who really pays for a tariff. First things first, what even is a tariff? Super simple. It's a tax on imported goods. Here's an easy way to think about it. When Apple brings an iPhone into the US from a factory in China, the US government slaps a tax on it right at the border. That tax is the tariff. And this brings us right to that big myth I mentioned, the idea that the exporting country, China, pays for the tariff. But the reality? That's just not how it works. Research from places like the Peterson Institute confirms it's the American company importing the goods. We're talking Walmart, Ford, your local appliance store. They're the ones who pay the tax directly to the U.S. government. And once they've paid it, they have two choices. They can either absorb the cost, which means lower profits for them, or they can pass that cost right on to you. And this really shows you the whole journey of that cost, right? It's a chain reaction. Step 1, the U.S. importer pays the tariff at the border. Step 2, they pass that extra cost on to the wholesaler. Step 3, the wholesaler passes it to the retailer. And at each step, the price creeps up a little. So by the time that product finally lands on the shelf, the price tag you see has all those costs baked into it. And guess who pays it at the checkout? Yep, you do. Okay, so let's get practical. Which items in your shopping cart are going to be affected the most? We're going to break down the consumer hit list and also take a look at the bigger picture, the impact on jobs and the whole economy. So the things getting hit the hardest are pretty much what you'd expect. Stuff that relies heavily on imported parts or is built overseas. We're talking electronics, your laptop, your phone, your TV. We're talking major appliances that use a ton of imported steel and aluminum, furniture for sure, and a big one is cars and auto parts, where tariffs on some of those components can be 25% or even higher. And hey, this isn't just a China thing. Goods coming from Mexico and Canada, our closest trading partners, are facing tariffs up to 25% on things like cars and appliances. And yeah, imports from China are getting hit with tariffs of 10%, and in some cases, a lot higher, especially on electronics and those little essential components like motors and compressors that go into pretty much everything. So when all is said and done, who's actually footing the bill for all this? Well, an analysis from Goldman Sachs really breaks it down. They project that U.S. consumers, that's you and me, will end up absorbing about 55% of all these tariff costs. American businesses, they'll eat about 22%, and the foreign exporters, only about 18%. The message here couldn't be clearer. the vast majority of this cost lands squarely on the American consumer. And these ripple effects, they don't just stop at prices. We're seeing real-world consequences for jobs and for businesses. Some manufacturers, especially in the auto industry, have already announced layoffs because their profit margins are getting squeezed so tight. Other companies are scrambling to shift their supply chains to different countries, like Vietnam. But look, that kind of change takes years. In the meantime, major retailers are seeing their profits shrink as they try their best to shield us, the customers, from the full impact. Okay, I know this all sounds pretty heavy. But here's the good news. You are not powerless in this situation. So let's shift gears. Let's move from the problem to the solutions and talk about some practical steps you can take to tariff-proof your wallet. First off, let's get the timeline straight because it's really important. In early 2025, companies mostly absorbed the initial shock. Then, towards the end of 2025, we started to see those costs trickle down into retail prices. But the big wave, that's expected in early 2026. A lot of major retailers have already warned their investors, saying that if these tariffs stick around, significant price hikes are on the way. So, what can you actually do about it? Well, if you're planning a big purchase like a new fridge or a laptop, it might be smart to think about buying it before the spring of 2026. Now, I'm not talking about panic buying here, just strategic timing. Another thing, check the label. Products made in the USA or sometimes Mexico or Canada can be exempt from these specific tariffs. And hey, don't forget that buying used, refurbished, or from a local maker is a fantastic way to dodge those import duties altogether. And on the personal finance side of things, this is really a good time to get back to basics. Start tracking your spending so you know exactly where your money's going, especially in those categories that are getting hit hard by tariffs. And with the job market softening, we saw over 1 million layoffs in 2025. Building up your emergency fund is more crucial than ever. Finally, do your best to avoid taking on new high-interest debt. It's only going to get tougher to pay down if prices keep climbing. Look, at the end of the day, it comes down to this. There are things you can't control, right? You can't control government policy or corporate pricing decisions or these massive global supply chains, but you absolutely can control your own actions. You can control when you buy things, what you choose to buy, and how you prepare your own budget for whatever's coming next. So the takeaway here is simple. A tariff isn't some invisible tax on another country. It is a very visible tax on you. And while companies did their best to absorb the hit in 2025, that's over. The bill is coming due, and it's headed straight for your wallet in 2026. And that really leaves us with just one final question to think about. This price wave is on its way. Is your budget ready for it?